When you hear the word nymph, what image comes to mind? Maybe a tiny fairy dancing through the woods, like a butterfly or a beautiful maiden, watching over a clear spring. Thanks to modern fairy tales and fantasy films, nymphs are often remembered as pure and lovely spirits of nature. But in Greek mythology, their image was far less gentle. In many myths, they appear as some of the most dangerous supernatural beings people could encounter. Today, let's look at the side of nymphs most people never hear about, and the stories that gave them such a dark reputation. Nymphs were never just pretty fairies. In Greek myth, they were living symbols of nature itself, and that meant they carried both sides of it. Nature gives life, but it can also take it away without warning. That is why people in the ancient Greek world honored nymphs, but feared them too. In many stories, meeting one did not end well for humans. What made nymphs especially frightening was their beauty. In myth, they were described as overwhelmingly beautiful, but that beauty was often a trap for mortal men. A man who saw a nymph in the woods or by the water might lose his reason and follow her deeper into the wild, and that was where danger began. In these stories, people drawn in by a nymph could wander into a deep forest, rush into dangerous water, and never return. Ancient Greeks even had a word for this kind of supernatural possession: nympholepsy. Today, we might read it as heat stroke, obsession, or a tragic accident in nature. But in myth, it meant a person had been seized by the power of a nymph. Among the most feared were the Naiads, the nymphs of springs, rivers, lakes, and wells. They represented the mystery and power of water. In many Greek communities, people made offerings at the spring that supplied their drinking water. The reason was simple: if a nymph was angered, people believed she could foul the water or make the spring dry up. But the darker side of the Naiads went even further. In myth, they could lure young men with beautiful voices and songs, drawing them closer until they were pulled into the water's depths. The stories say those taken by them never rose again. When someone drowned in a lake, people often explained it as the anger of a nymph. The Dryads, the nymphs of trees, were no less dangerous. Each one was tied to a specific tree, so deeply that the tree was like her body and soul. So what happened if a person cut into that tree with an axe? In myth, the Dryad would appear at once and take revenge if a farmer collapsed without warning while cutting wood, or a lumberman was crushed by a falling branch. People could see it as the curse of an angry tree nymph. What made them even more frightening was the idea that their revenge might not stop with one person. A curse from a Dryad could extend to an entire family line. That is why people treated tree cutting with great care, offering prayers and seeking permission from the divine before touching certain trees. Then there were the Oreads, the nymphs of mountains and caves, who carried an even darker mood. In myth, they avoided human contact and showed no mercy to anyone who entered their territory carelessly. A hunter who suddenly lost his way, or a traveler who vanished in a cave, could be explained as a victim of the Oreads. These stories say they lured people deeper into the mountains, then led them toward cliffs, avalanches, or deadly falls. What we might now describe as sudden disorientation in the wilderness was once imagined as the work of mountain nymphs, surrounding people with mist and confusion. But were nymphs simply evil? Not exactly, because they symbolized nature itself. They stood beyond a simple line between good and bad. In some myths, nymphs helped humans. They offered guidance to heroes, revealed signs from the gods, or provided water in times of need. But the key point is that their kindness was never guaranteed. It depended entirely on their mood. One moment, they could seem like protectors. The next, they could become a person's worst enemy. That double nature is exactly why people treated them with such careful respect. One of the most striking examples of the danger surrounding nymphs appears in interpretations of the story of Hyacinthus. In the best-known version, Hyacinthus, the beautiful youth loved by Apollo, dies during a discus game when the wind god Zephyrus, driven by jealousy, sends the discus off course. But some readings add another layer. They suggest that nymphs of the woods may have played a role. Angered that Apollo's attention had turned elsewhere. In that reading, the tragedy becomes not just an accident of jealousy, but a sign of how beauty, desire, and resentment could turn deadly in myth. The nymph is no longer just part of the scenery. She becomes an active force in human fate. The fear of nymphs did not stay inside stories alone. It shaped the way people thought about nature, and how carefully they moved through it. Warnings that young men should not wander too freely near forests, rivers, or sacred springs were more than simple superstition. They also worked as lessons in survival. Polluting a spring, washing carelessly in sacred water, or disrespecting a grove could be seen as an insult to the nymph who dwelled there, and the price for that disrespect was thought to be severe. In that sense, these myths also encouraged people to protect natural spaces and treat vital resources with caution. In the end, the danger of the nymph can be read as a warning about the relationship between humans and nature, beautiful and inviting on the surface, yet also merciless and unpredictable. Nature in Greek myth was often given a face through the figure of the nymph. The message hidden in these legends feels clear. Do not take nature lightly. Behind the cute image of a woodland fairy lies something far more unsettling. So what do you think? Once we notice the danger hidden behind beauty, myth starts to feel less like a simple old story, and more like a mirror for how people have always tried to understand the world around them.